Good morning, students. How are you? Hope you are all doing well in the examinations. And I'm happy to meet you again. Today, I'm going to talk with you particularly a very important language skill, that is listening. You all know you have been learning English for many years. In your textbooks, you will be taught the different kinds of listening skills and speaking and reading and writing of 4 language skills, LSRW. Listening is very important. Listening is an ability to receive and interpret messages in the communicative process. Thus, it is a very key language skill to communicate particularly the messages to other people. Without this ability, it is very difficult to communicate, and most of the time your messages will be misunderstood. So you know the familiar saying that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. It is easy to remember that listening is very important element, and particularly it is twice as important as talking. So we have to be very cautious in the skill and improve our communicative skills. Listening, most of the time students feel that it is an activity simply sitting in the classroom, sitting back and barely staying awake, let the speaker's words wash over us. But actually it is a very difficult skill, and we have to, if you want to achieve something in your communicative process, it is the language skill, it is the listening skill that you must master. Here, most of the time teachers speaking to you in the classroom, when your attention is being drifted and he will be asking you, are you listening to me? Are you all there? Generally this question is actually aimed to divert your attention to the teacher who teaches something to you in the classroom, making you feel involved in the lesson, the teaching process. You know, active listening, and the teacher wants you to be active in the classroom, and it is the listening is a very communicative technique, very active communicative technique, which requires listeners to provide feedback on what he or she teaches or hears from the speaker. And at the end of the teaching, you are expected to say something what you have learned from the class. So for that sake, you have to be very cautious and very active, actively involved in the teaching process. Listening actually involves 5 stages. It begins with the receiving, understanding, evaluating, remembering, responding. Language skills, actually the 4 language skills you are familiar with: listening, speaking, reading, writing. These 4 language skills are divided into 2 groups. The listening and reading are receptive skills. Speaking, writing are productive skills. So receptive skills, you will be receiving the information, and after receiving you will be reading it. Only then you will be speaking and writing. So most of the time in Indian classrooms, the teachers actually focus on writing and speaking, whereas listening is very much neglected. So because of that, you have to be very cautious and focus on the important skill listening and improve your communicative language. And most of the time the students feel that hearing and listening, hear and listen are synonymous, but actually these are 2 important words, have the different meanings. Hearing is accidental, it is involuntary, and it is effortless. And whereas the listening, when you come to the listening part, it is focused, voluntary, intentional. For example, hearing, hearing, since you have the ears, you can hear many sounds without your involvement, physical involvement or mental involvement. The sounds come to you, and you may or you may not pay attention to it. But when you want to pay attention to it, you have to be very cautious, and the element, the very important skill comes, that is listening, and it is very focused, and it is voluntary and intentional. So you should be very clear. Hearing is different from listening. And most of the students find difficulty in listening, and even if the lecture is very short or the things are very brief, their attention is drifted. Actually, what makes them not focus on the lecture? There are many types of noise that obstruct the listeners to attend the messages, and the external and internal. Particularly the noise, different kinds of noise, particularly of the different kinds of noise. The first one is a physical noise, and physical noise involves external activities, and you can also find the sound of the fans in the classroom, and the barking dogs in the streets, noisy corridors where the students move hither and thither, and loud music in the nearby room, lectures in other rooms. All these are physical noise that obstruct you, that impede your listening process. Now, the second one is psychological noise, that is internal, and particularly worries about money. For example, students sitting in the classroom have the personal problems. They bring the personal problems to the classroom, and they begin to think of the problems while the lecture is going on. And there are some other items, that is a crushing deadlines, the presence of some other people. So the students are the audience, particularly the listeners are not interested in the people sitting beside them. So because of that, their listening process is impeded. And there is another factor that impedes their listening is a bias related to the lecturer. Sometimes they may not like the lecturer, so they pay less attention to their lecture and miss out on the important aspects that are being discussed in the classroom. And there is another factor that impedes the listening process is a physiological noise. For example, it concerns the feeling ill, having a headache, hungry. So most of the students are coming from a distant places to the classroom sitting in the classroom on empty stomach, listening to the lectures. They feel hungry, and students with a hungry stomach may not listen to the lectures properly. So these elements should be avoided. And there is another noise that is called semantic noise. It is related to meanings of the words, phrases, slang, euphemism. When the lecturer is teaching, and he will be using certain words while discussing the subject, particularly the meanings where the student is unfamiliar, and he will be starting to know, or he will be reasoning or trying to understand the meaning of the one word where he stops listening to the lecture. And sometimes the teacher uses different kinds of phrases, and the slang particularly, particular jargon. So sometimes euphemism also creates problems for the students. What do you mean by euphemism? Euphemism is a kind of technique used to denote certain bad things in the classroom in a simple way, in a friendly manner. Okay, that kind of euphemism may be misunderstood or may not be understood by the students in the classroom. And particularly there are many barriers. So listening has many problems, creates problems for the students. Particularly, people think that if somebody is very good at communication, they think that talking is very important. Actually, listening is the most critical communicative skill, and whereas the talking steals the show. So most of the students think that talking is more important than listening, but actually listening is very, very critical communicative skill. And another barrier is that all other skills are given trained in the classroom, whereas training in listening is not done in the classrooms. So speaking precedes listening, and speaking is given more importance than listening. And most of the time we filter out the things that we do not like in the lecture. So sometimes the filters will help us understand certain things, and sometimes we will be missing out very important aspects taught by the lecturer when you have a bias towards the lecturer, or the subject towards the lecturer, the people sitting around you. So all these become the barriers for proper listening. When you come to another barrier, that is listening takes a lot of mental effort. Actually, see, when the student is impatient, when he is not able to pay attention, and which actually listening takes a lot of effort on him, and he will be thinking about what the lecturer is going to speak ahead, and as a result he will be missing out the present. So this is also one of the barriers creating the problems for proper listening. Now then comes the question how to listen. Particularly language is a skill, and listening is also one of the important skills. Like a skill, you have to develop strategies that gel with your personality or worldview, and these become the coping mechanisms that help you get by. You can employ them to navigate conversations. So strategies should be developed in order to continue the process of communication, and particularly facing a situation where you are not able to understand, the strategies come to rescue you, and you will have to employ these strategies to have a good conversation. And there are different styles of listening, and you find the people, different people, particularly when they pretend to be listening to the lectures, we can categorize them as the fraud listener, the charmer, the rational. Now, who is the fraud listener? Now, you see, the fraud listener tries to impress the speaker. Now, sitting nearly 30-40 students sitting in the classroom, all may not be paying attention to the lecturer in a similar manner. So they will be pretending to the lecturer as if they are able to understand everything is taught in the classroom, and he nods his head and tries to maintain eye contact. So by this he tries to impress upon the teacher that he is paying attention to. Actually he is a fraud, he is not actually listening. And there is another kind of listener is called interrupter. You see, we find some in the classroom always raising their hands to interfere with the teaching of the lecturer, and they want to steal the show by asking questions. Actually they ask questions for the sake of asking, and particularly they keep quiet for a while, and in order to make a thought, once the thought is made, they begin to interrupt the lecturer. So this kind of listener is called interrupter. And there is another kind of listener called charmer, and he listens words not to the meaning. He generally pays attention to the words and tries to attract the speaker with some smiling and nodding, and he appears to be agree with the speaker. So he is charming, and he is trying to attract the attention of the teacher by focusing on only the words, not to the meaning. So such kind of listener is called charmer. And there is another kind of listener called self-absorbed listener. Self-absorbed is very much interested in himself. He is a narcissist. He always tries to impress upon the teacher by knowing to how do I look. Am I acting like I'm listening? Does the speaker think I'm smart? So he wants to have the full attention of the lecturer on him, and actually he is not paying attention to the lecture at all. So such kind of listeners are called self-absorbed listeners. They pay very less attention to the subject rather than their own personality, their own looks, their own appearance in the classroom. They want to be sure in the classroom, center of the attraction in the classroom. There is another kind of listener called a rational listener. No doubt he listens it very sincerely and intently, but he focuses on the factual parts of the lecturer's speech. Particularly he tries to categorize the speaker's words, and as a result he fails to assess the emotional part of speech. Actually speech, when a lecturer gives a lecture, there is a meaning in it, there is a feeling in it, and the feeling is missed by the rational thinker. He always searches for the facts, and he never cares for the real intention of the speaker. And now the question arises, why should we listen? Now, why should we listen? Should we listen for anything that is there? Is there any benefit for us? Particularly when you look at the personalities in the world, great personalities in the world, great leaders, facilitators, doctors, famous actors are all great listeners. Whoever listens well becomes a great person in the world. Particularly listening will help you to build trust. It will help you create credibility, and it also it helps you getting things done, and you will also get a lot of information by listening to others. So if you want to become a great person in the world, if you want to become successful in your life, you have to have great listening patience, and particularly you have to train your ears. And now there is another purpose. Intensive listeners are there. So intensive listener are trusted actually. When you listen carefully, seriously to others, you will be trusted. And what do you mean by trust, and how does it help? Trust is the grease of changing minds, and the learning is the key. So it acts like a grease in the way of life, and it will help you to move forward. So you have to have the skill of listening, and if you listen carefully to others, if you try to understand the feelings of others, you will be trusted, and the trust will help you achieve many things in your life. And it will also create credibility and develop a kind of credibility between the listener and the speaker. And if you listen to the speaker uninterruptedly, and that results in credibility, and he will believe you, you will be perceived as a competent, capable and supportive. So competent and capable and supportive, the adjectives that you want to achieve, you should have a patience, and you should train your ears, and you should listen to the persons very carefully without posing any questions. So you will have to have the fellow feeling. And for example, listening shows respect and empathy for the speaker. So when you are paying attention seriously to the listener, listening to him very sincerely, you are in another way respecting him or showing empathy for the speaker. So by listening you convey, you are more important to me, I respect you. So without saying these expressions, by simply looking at him with training your ears to your speech, you will be accepting him, you will be supporting him, and he feels confident that his message is being understood by the listener. And good listening will help you get things done. And particularly, besides trust, you will get your things done by listening. You get a lot of useful information. Following the speaker from the beginning to the end, you achieve much with a little talk. You need not talk in the between, just pay attention to what he teaches in the classroom. So you will be achieving a great deal, and paying much attention to his speech. And you will be also achieving your goals. Listening is reciprocal. So listen, if you listen, you will be listened to. If you support others, they support you. In turn, you can achieve your goals. So listening is reciprocal, and if you want to be listened to, you have to pay attention, you listen to others, so without any interruption. So listening is supporting others, and if you support them, they will support you in turn. And effective listener. So listening effectively will make you a better student. So most of the time, listening is taken for granted actually. You see, before invention of writing, and the great epics and great stories, folk tales, particularly the tribal histories, and the great tales of our ancestors were carried or passed from one person to another through only talking and listening. And even today, even after the invention of great scientific development, particularly scientific gadgets, if you listen to the real-time listening, you will be having some benefits. You become a great student and better prospects. You will have better prospects, and you will have the interpersonal relationships. Particularly by listening effectively, you will develop a particular interpersonal relationships, and considered as more intelligent and a stronger public speaker. So if you listen to the lecturer, or if you listen to the speaker, you will be learning the techniques of speaking, and you will be picking up some expressions where the expressions work and do not work. So you can use them in your speech when you go back to speak at other place. So effective listener will make you a better student. It will develop a kind of interpersonal relationship, and you will be considered intelligent, and moreover you become a public speaker. And there are many tips to hone your listening skills. Now you think you are, for example, you are listening to a lecture or a speech, you are being disturbed by others. You think that you are in a tunnel or a vacuum. In order to avoid the distracting sounds, such as the sounds of door, sounds of students going and coming in, and the sounds of the fans and other people talking. So when you want to be away from all this, you have to feel that you are in a vacuum or a tunnel, and this is one of the tips. And there is another tip: tell yourself, be here. When you are being disturbed, when your attention is being drifted, you tell yourself, you caution yourself that be here now, because in order to avoid the drifting of your attention. And if you want to listen the lecture of the lecture in the classroom, you tell yourself and be cautious, and at the same time you stop fidgeting so that you can pay attention to the lecture. And one more tip for you. Now the personal problems, the personal worries that you bring to the classroom should be kept away in order to focus more on the lecture. So for that sake, you have to set aside worry time, and it is very difficult if something is eating you or something is troubling you, something is on your mind. So tell yourself that let's think of these worries after some time or after class. So you will be free from these worries so that you can focus on the lecture. And one more tip for you: to hear better, to see better. For example, when you hear and when you see better when you sit in the front. So in the beginning of your course, you come early and choose a place, particularly in the front or in the center, so that you will be having a claim on the seat, so that you will be having very intimate you will be having intimate relation between the teacher on the stage and between you, so that the teacher will have a focus on you. So when the teacher can see you, your attention never drifts. So this is a best technique. Most of the students prefer the last benches, but actually you have to sit either in the front or in the middle in order to have the focus of the teacher on you. So those who have those who are in the good books of the teacher, those that are under the surveillance of the teacher, would always fare well in the examinations in their life. So better have this tip in your mind while you sit in the classroom. And there is another tip for you. Now in order to avoid the distraction, or in order to keep the obstructions away from you, you better ask or answer the questions now and then, so that you will be having getting the attention back. So try to be active participant in the discussion, so thus you can avoid the distraction of your attention. One more tip: now before the class begins or one day earlier, you have to prepare well and keep the material ready, fill your mind with the questions, and have some points to be highlighted in the classroom, so that when the lecture begins in the classroom, since you are already ready with you have read out the lesson, you will be familiar with some topics, so you can get involved in the subject, and also you will be asking proper questions so that the lecturer will focus on you. So thus you can save yourself from being distracted or getting diverted from the main course of teaching in the classroom. So this is one of the important tips for listening. And there is another tip for you. Now if you get distracted, try to take notes, and you try to group the main important points, relevant points, and try to listen for clues before the lecture begins. That will help organize the notes. You see, the students who attend the class will understand many things, because the lecturer is not simply teaching. He will be sometimes while using words and phrases and sentences, and he will be focusing, he will emphasize certain words, and he will be saying something with a feeling. So such things can be lost when the student is not paying attention, or the student who absents himself from the class. So taking notes will help you keep your attention to the subject being taught in the classroom, and this is very important tip you have to keep in your mind while listening to the lecture. And one more important aspect that you have to keep in your mind is regulation of your energy. And listening is, I told you, it's a very critical language skill, and it requires a lot of mental effort, and it consumes a lot of energy. So managing energy is very, very important. So check in yourself with now and then, and you see, feeling tense, when you are feeling tense, take few deep breaths and relax, and when you are feeling sleepy, sit up straight and stretch a little, and this will help you revive your energy and focus on the lecture. So regulation of energy is very, very important in the classroom, as the language skill or the listening is very, very very difficult one that takes a lot of your energy. And take care of your body, that is very, very important. And you know, for students, you know, 9 to 11 hours are very important for sleeping. Sleep well before you attend the lecture in the class, and eat healthy food. And when you come to the class, bring water and good snacks, particularly snacks like nuts and fruit, and don't avoid junk food. And if you follow these tips, you can be very active in the classroom and participate actively in the lecture. And there are some more tips for you. And whenever you are going to the class, you go to the class with the I can do attitude or a positive mindset. So you know, say sometimes the students are scared of attending some classes, the subjects which they do not like. They think that I do not understand anything in the class. So if you start thinking in this way, you never understand anything in the class. So it is better for you to have the positive mindset, and I can do, I can understand, I can achieve something. If you have these feelings and go to the class, certainly at least you can understand a part of it and be benefited. And reading skills, you know, you see, we are talking about the listening skills. Reading skills come in to help you to improve your listening skills. You see, listen, actually when our learning process begins with listening. You know, see, when we were children, we never wrote or read. Simply we listened to our parents. When they said something, we imitated them. So listening is very, very important. Listen and then read the material. So for example, as a grown-up, as an adult, as a student, for example, you are watching something on TV. First of all, you listen to it and read the subtitles, and listen and read, and then listen, read and memorize them. So that will help you remember the things. And so when you start listening again, second time you will be shadowing it or mimicking it, and in other words, you will be repeating what you hear. So when you want to say it out aloud with a feeling, and you can feel action and emotion in your word. So first you listen, then when you listen and read and speak, then listen first, then listen and read, then listen, read and speak. So it begins with listening and speaking comes last. And so following the subtitles on, particularly in watching film or some TV serial, so going through the subtitles will help you what you hear, and that can reinforce your listening skill. When you pay close attention to sound, you can produce it properly. So when you listen properly, you can produce it properly. Otherwise you fail miserably because you know, because of your lack of interest and lack of listening skills. Speaking becomes harder and reading will be harder when you are not paying attention to listening properly. And one of the important aspects of listening is the stress and accent. When you are listening to the lecturer or any speaker, you have to mind the stress and accent of the sentences he uses in his speech. For example, you take an example here. I don't think she should dance now. You see, if you take it as a normal saying, for example, normal statement, I don't think she should dance now. Suppose if I emphasize on the first letter, that is the first word I, read it again, I don't think she should dance now. So that means somebody else thinks she should dance now. It is not me. So if you change the stress to or if you focus or stress the another word, for example, I don't think she should dance now. So it is not true that I think she should dance now. The meaning varies. For example, there is in the first sentence, if you emphasize the first word, it is somebody else thinks she should dance. If you emphasize the second word, it is not true that I think she should dance now. Now read the third one. I don't think she should dance now. That is not really what I meant. So I meant something else. So see, as you focus, as the emphasis changes from one word to another word, meaning changes. So when you are listening to a lecture, you should also focus where he stresses, where he emphasizes. Only then you can understand the real intention or the underlying meaning of the words and sentences. And you will have another. I don't think she should dance now. Somebody else should somebody else should dance now. So it is when you focus on or when you emphasize she, so the meaning changes, the meaning changes, and you are talking about some other person, not the she. So there is another example for you. I never said she stole my money. Now you can read it and tell me how many meanings you find in the sentence. So if you focus on I never said she stole my money. It is not me, somebody else said. I never said. It is no question of saying. She might have stole my money, but it is not actually said. I never said she stole my money. So I never said, I did not say she stole my money. Somebody might have said it. I never said she stole money. Somebody might have stole the money, but not she. I said she stole my money. So see, as you change the emphasis, you get a new meaning. And this simple sentence has 7 meanings. As you go on emphasizing one word after another, so you will be having different meanings. So this kind of variation you can find only when you train your ears while listening to the lecture and listening effectively and very sincerely, honestly, and only then you can get the meanings and underlying sense of the words and phrases. And there is another example for you. English orthography is often ambiguous. So most of the time, the writing is a different, the spelling of the word is a different from the pronunciation. Now you look at the word here, read. Read can be either read or read, depending on the tense. For example, if it is a present tense, if it is used as in the present tense, it is read. If it is used as a past word or past form, it is called read. So how does a student know that it is, whether it is read or read? Only when he listens to the lecture, only when he pays attention to the speech in the speech or the lecture in the classroom, he can be identifying the different pronunciation. So you will be learning many words and phrases and sentences and their meaning. Now let's as I told you, stress placement determines the part of speech of the word. As you change the stress, you will have a different parts of speech. Particularly, there is a rule, as a rule of thumb, if the stress is on the second syllable, the word is usually a verb. So when there are many hundreds of words in English language. The same word is used as verb or noun or adjective, and when stress is on the first syllable, it is a noun. If it is on the second syllable, it is a verb. So you learn that stress is very, very important in communication system and communication process, and if you listen properly, you can find the variation and you can speak well and read well and understand others' messages properly. Now, there is another word for you. You take a word like absent. If you place the stress on the first syllable, it is pronounced as absent. It is used as an adjective meaning not present. If you change this stress onto the second syllable, absent, to absent yourself, that is not to go to place where one is expected to be. I absented myself from the class. So absent is different from absent, but the spelling is same. So only the stress, the variation, the changing of the stress gives you two different parts. Okay, the two different parts of speech. That is, one is adjective, the other one is verb. Look at another example. content, right? Content, it is noun. Content, that is the contained material. What is the content of the speech? What is the content of the lecture? You can say, if you change the stress to the second syllable, it becomes adjective or verb. For example, content. So content is satisfied as an adjective. It also means to satisfy when it is used as a verb. So he contents, or means he is challenging sometimes, So content is different from content. And you also always keep, you have to mind the stress in order to be very familiar with the different nuances and the meanings of the sentences. You take another example, desert, desert as a noun, desert. The stress is on the first syllable. It should be pronounced as desert. You know that desert is a sandy land and it's a dry, it's a kind of barren land. When you change the stress to the second syllable, it is desert. Okay, so first one is a desert, the second one is a desert, and a desert means to abandon or give up or leave somebody in lurch. So the one word, if you say I desert him, this is a desert. If I say this is a desert, that is a wrong expression. Say this is a desert, and she deserted him. She deserted him. You can when you know the meanings and the variation in the meanings as the stress changes, you can use them in your own sentences and speak well. And there is another word for a very common word, that is essay. When you stress on the first syllable, it becomes essay. Essay is a short piece of writing for student, and most of the time students are asked to write essay on something. And if you change the stress to the second syllable, it becomes essay. Okay, it is a literary term meaning to try to do something. So you should be very careful using such words, very simple words. Let's look at another example. You say invite as a verb, invite. If it is a noun, invite. So invite, calling someone to the party, or if the stress with the first syllable, it becomes a noun, and you say I got invite, that is invitation. So next, look at another example, object. Okay, object. So it is a verb, objecting something, and if you use the first syllable, stress with the first syllable is object. So the thing, object means thing, and if it is object, it is your trying to stop someone, showing you are not showing interest, stopping someone to do something. So then look at another example, produce. So if it stresses on the first syllable, it is a noun, and stresses on the second syllable, produce, it is a verb. Now look at another example, project. Now, there are many words. If you want to learn words like this, you will be benefited, and you can improve your language skills. Particularly, very common word, address. You say address. Can you give me your address? You are talking about the name of the place where you live. And if I say address, address is addressing the people. And today, these days, political leaders are addressing large gatherings in order to attract the audience. So, if the stress is on first syllable, it becomes address, that is a place where you live, and if the stress is on the second syllable, address, you are speaking to someone or addressing someone. And you take a word rebel, rebel, a person who rebels. If you say rebel, rebelling against somebody, so protesting. So rebel is a person, rebel is a kind of acting, rebelling, action of act of rebelling. You take a record, a record, you can create a record. Now that can be recorded. So if you use the second stress on the second syllable, it becomes verb. A record is a kind of a historical event you have created. Now the very simple word digest and digest. So digest is a when we eat something, the food is changed into a form so that our body uses it, digest. And if it is digest, it's a kind of short report. Readers digest. There's a very popular magazine, very standard magazine. Most of the learned people read it. Digest. Readers digest. But as a biological term, as a word used in science, is digest. So refuse and refuse. Refuse is a noun. Refuse is a verb. Now, very common word. Most of the students go wrong in using this because they never listen it properly, or most of the times the lecturers are not conscious about certain words teaching the students, where generally they go wrong. You take conduct, conduct. Conduct is a character, a person's behavior. Your conduct is not good. And if you say, I want to conduct the exam, conduct. So the stress is on second syllable as a verb. It is usually a verb, and organize. The meaning of the word is organize. So when you move to the convert, convert and convert. Convert is a person who converted, and convert is an act of converting somebody from one thing to another. So similarly, you have many words where you can be paying attention, where you can learn many things by paying attention to the speech, listening to them very sincerely and honestly. And now look at this. You should also be cautious about the intonation. So without intonation, your speech will become flat and monotonous. So in order to avoid this monotonous in your speech, you have to change the tone of your voice. So the most obvious role of intonation is to express our attitudes, our emotions, our anger, shock, surprise, pleasure, and everything. So even your interest and boredom, seriousness, sarcasm, and many others will be expressed through in the speech when the speaker uses a proper intonation. So you will be missing out if you are not attending the class, if you are not listening to him properly, if you are not aware of the intonation, so you will be missing out all these important aspects, and the language becomes dull and the class becomes boring. So the lecturer who wants to keep the attention of the students intact, he should also change the modulation of his speech, and he should change the tone of his speech, and practice the intonation in his speech, so that the students can try to understand what he is listening to, what he is trying to understand from the lecture. So let me conclude that there are listening skills will involve, and particularly intonation. WH words have one kind of intonation, falling intonation. Yes or no type questions have rising intonation. Statements, falling intonation. Question tags, falling and rising. And if you have a long list, rising and falling later. For example, you say 1, 2, 3, 4. So 3, 5, 6, 7, okay, like this. So if you have a long list, the last word, okay, falls. So if you manage this, if you follow the intonation techniques while speaking, the students will be completely will be focused towards your lecture, and the listening will help you. Proper listening will help you become a better student. And I hope you all have learned something from this lecture, and certainly you will be benefited if you practice listening well in the classroom, and don't take it lightly. Don't take it for granted. Listening is one of the important language skills. I hope you have understood the importance of language skill, and we will be meeting again next time. Bye.